the computer has a consequence. And then in the late 40s and 50s, food has become more convenient. Cornflakes and Coca-Cola are American staples. They're considered healthy. Are they really considered healthy? Well, Pepsi funds the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and cornflakes is part of a balanced breakfast, right? Wrong, right? Flying, let's just talk a little bit more about, I'm just going to touch on technology. Flying and the car. Now people can travel great distances, so now genetics, gene pools are no longer isolated. Things can spread and mix. We're a conglomerate of all different types of gene pools now. Industrial revolution, we were able to mass produce things. Traveling with a boat, that's Columbus's boat, gunpowder. Now I can take you over, even if I'm weaker than you, because I got a gun and I'm a good shot, right? All right. But now I'm gonna break the mold a little bit. I'm gonna go back even further, right? What about the chair? Well, that's a modern convenience. We're all sitting in chairs right now. There's nothing wrong with a chair. Is that really a technological advancement? Well, guess what? The Mayo Clinic has just come out with, well, not just, over the last 3 years, they've been confirming a study that says that sitting is the new smoking. That because we sit more than 3 hours uninterrupted, because of our workload, and because we're pushing that computer, typing, it actually has sedentary effects, detrimental effects, equal to that of one cigarette, 3 hours in a chair, unmoving. So you better get up. In fact, let's get up right now. Let's just stand up and put out that cigarette. So let's just stand up. Just stand. All you have to do is stand up. There we go. There we go. So let's make sense of all this stuff. Let's make sense of we've talked about this insulin resistance. Insulin resistance and carbohydrate tolerance are you guys don't have to stand as much. All you have to do is just kind of move things around and get back to that technological convenient thing known as the chair. Okay? Insulin resistance and carb sensitivity are inversely related, right? So if you're carb sensitive or carb tolerant, right? Then you're insulin. If you're carb tolerant, you're insulin sensitive. If you're carb intolerant, you're insulin resistant, because there's a relationship there, right? So if you can handle carbohydrate well, you don't need much insulin to help you, right? And less of it can be secreted, and that's healthy. If just a little bit of carbohydrate causes a hyper secretion of insulin, then you're in trouble, right? And that's why everyone should get their fasting insulin tested, because after a 12-hour fast, there should be low levels of insulin in your bloodstream, right? Because there shouldn't be too much carbohydrate that you need insulin to regulate it. There's a direct correlation between obesity, and we just talked about this in several studies, and this direct correlation is related to also heart disease. What's the leading cause of death? What's the most likely way that every one of us is going to die in this room? According to statistics, it is a heart attack or heart disease, something cardiovascular related. Well, obesity and insulin resistance is correlated to most of us being overweight. What's a simple test? And this is a harsh one. All right, remember, I'm a personal trainer, I'm a sports nutritionist, so I can be a little harsh, right? If you're a woman and your waistline is greater than 30, there's a potential that you are insulin resistant. You potentially have fatty liver or visceral fat or that high-risk fat. In men, it's 36, okay? I have about 12 or 14% body fat right now, and just in my own body frame, I'm 35.5 waist, right? I can squeeze into 34s, but if you put the tape measure on, that's 35.5. So that's a tight range, but my goal is to stay below 36 the rest of my life. All right, so how do we measure this? Well, there's blood work you can get done, and if you go to trisystem.network, you can get the blood work sheet for free. You can take that to your doctor, or you can actually use our labs, and we have a relationship with a lab where you can just go directly. If your doctor is not sympathetic to a low-carb lab test, like an fasting insulin. So we've actually experienced that. I've experienced that. He hasn't experienced it because he'll give the test to anybody that asks him. But I've said to my clients, go get a fasting insulin, And they said, my doctor said I don't need it. I got my blood glucose done, I've got my A1C, I'm good. Well, no, you're not good. We just proved that separate fasting insulin test is needed. And you can get the information, the CPE codes, if you click on the free assessment. We got to determine if this is right for you. And we just figured out that it's right for the majority of us. But what about you sitting in that chair? What about specifically you? All right, there's the blood test. Well, another good thing to do is take measurements other than just your waistline, right? So within this free assessment that you can download, you can track yourself 10 different markers with a tape measure. And you can look at the distribution of fat. It's also a good goal setter, right? Just because you didn't lose in your waist this week doesn't mean you're not going to lose it in the next week. But maybe you lost it in your thigh. Maybe you lost it in your hips. Maybe you gained in your biceps, like James back there. And maybe his waist didn't go down, but he put an inch on his biceps. Those are incentives to continue. So it's good to use metrics to motivate you, but not idolize them. All right? This is a good metric. This is what it's all about. This is why, as a sports nutritionist, we rewrote this personal training course and our sports nutrition course, because now people are interested not only in learning this stuff for themselves, but spreading the news. If you're on the ketogenic lifestyle and you've had great success, well, you need to be an evangelist. You need to tell other people. And you need to make sure you're telling other people the truth. And that's why we wrote this course, because this is what my clients want. Right? It's nice to have lean arms and legs, but most men, they want it around the middle. Right? That's 6 weeks. Talk about fatty liver. Ooh, this is a good one. This is yours.
Yeah, thanks for putting that in there. Well, there's
Mary.
I'm not saying anything, but I didn't know Jeff was putting this in. But a patient of mine lost half her body weight, down to from 372 to 186, right? And I didn't have the heart to tell her that low carb diet was just a fad, and it was just a placebo effect. That's not really helping her, because that's what you're going to see over and over. Because they say, "Well, that's just an anecdotal, doesn't mean anything." You have thousands of doctors putting stuff out now saying, "Look, here's my success. Here's what's happening." Jason Fung just published a study showing people coming off insulin by doing intermittent fasting or more prolonged fasting through him. Because again, whether you're fasting or whether you're eating a low-carb diet, you're depleting your liver of sugar. That is what we're talking about. That is the underlying premise of what we're talking about. Making our bodies more sensitive to insulin, because insulin is a bad thing in big doses. Just like any hormone, testosterone, we need it. But if you have too high of a testosterone problem, you have too low, it's a problem. You want to be in that right range. So, some people say, well, testosterone is good, so I'm going to shoot up tons of testosterone, and then they end up getting cancer and all these other problems because they want to have the effects without doing the work, right? So, and it's funny because Tro, who I'm doing the podcast with, I'll say, hey, I had 3 people come in, I had this one came out blood pressure, this one came out diabetes, and it's like, now, let's just stop doing this. It's redundant now because every day we're saying like how great everyone's doing. We didn't do that before. So doctors are burned out because their patients are getting worse and worse, and we're throwing more drugs on.
Here's some good data. Right. So a lot of people in the sports nutrition industry say, well, if I exercise on this, or if I'm trying to stay active, I'm going to lose muscle. I'm going to be glycogen depleting, and that's going to lose muscle growth. So if you're an aesthetic athlete, like a bodybuilder or a fitness athlete who needs muscle to propel themselves, the low-carb, high-fat diet is not going to work, especially if I intermittently fast. Well, Wasim did both, and this is it's a little while ago now. It's about a year and a half ago, but he put on a half inch in a little over 10 days in his biceps, and he lost a half inch in his waist. Now, who doesn't want to do that? That's great. Here he is. He took it to the extreme, of course, right? But he's not overweight. He's not overweight in that picture. In the starting picture on the left, he's not overweight. But he is to the extreme. He's a gold medalist now and a fitness spokesmodel for natural fitness competitors. Very good. That's a model, and we were able to get her ready for a photo shoot in 3 to 5 days using this regime. It's for everybody. So we have Mr. Natural America. He's my client, John Sui, and you don't hear too many bodybuilders that are of Chinese descent, but he's one of them. And then over on the left there, she is a vegan, has to be a vegan, won't eat any animal product, won't eat honey because it comes from bee, And but she's able to do a ketogenic program and do it successfully because with working with her, we've developed programs that are acceptable and fall within the parameters. So it's not just for certain people. We can make this applicable to everyone. All right. The bottom line is what's the standard of care. What you see on the news still today is that's considered right is wrong, and we've got to change that. So here's a little bit of my research. I'll go quickly. Let's take all the diets known, everything that is a well-known diet that's either regional or religious, and it comes down to either you omit certain foods or you focus on certain foods. And if you were to structure that and organize that a little bit further, it comes down to a macronutrient balance and meal frequency. So there are high carbohydrate diets, carnivorous diets, or high protein diets, and there's high fat diets. Right? And all of these fall somewhere in the spectrum of macronutrients. And what we found out is there's a correlation, and this is what Dr. Lenski has been saying all along. If you eat a high carbohydrate diet, you spike insulin and it instigates hunger, and you need to eat frequently. So all these Happy New Year's juice fasts, reset cleanses that put you on a high carbohydrate juice but ask you to eat less than 500 calories a day or only eat twice a day, you're just putting yourself through a miserable time. And so there's a direct correlation between as you eat high fat, your meal frequency goes down. And so just like Dr. Brian said, you start out on a low carbohydrate diet and then you naturally move into what's known as intermittent fasting, and all that is less frequent eating. And so when someone comes in as a client of mine, what we do is we assess where they are on the spectrum and then just gradually move them in the right direction. You can also somatotype people. You can classify people by body type. So you probably heard about certain diets that say, let's eat according to your blood type, or let's eat according to your ethnicity, or let's eat according to your gender. And none of those really work anymore. One, because we are just a genetic mixture, we're a genetic melting pot worldwide. But there are some genetic markers, and the ones that I firmly believe in is somatotype. So there are people that are normally thin no matter what they do, and they have a propensity towards a certain type of diet. And then there are people that are balanced. Everybody thinks we're in the middle of the road, but most of us tend to be a little skinnier or a little bit fat, right? So if you are one of these somatotypes, then that's going to predicate your carb tolerance somewhat, within reason. So an ectomorph might be able to stay in ketosis at 50, 60, maybe even 70 grams of carbohydrate a day and actually be in ketosis, meaning they're still using fat predominantly as fuel. Whereas an endomorph or O-type might have to go at 20 gross carbs or 20 net carbs to just be in ketosis, just be in a level where they're using fat predominantly as fuel. So here's A and B, all right? If you're A, that's great, because you're my wife, you're just naturally gravitating towards a higher fat, lower carbohydrate diet. But if you're B, you may have a rough time in that. You may be, if you're B and you're an ectomorph and your blood markers are good, you may be able to be still in a lower carbohydrate diet, but have a greater personal allotment or tolerance for carbohydrate. You got to remember, in any case, it's like a seesaw. So as dietary fat goes up, right, you need to reduce insulin so that the surface of your vascular tissue doesn't look like the hard-boiled eggs. So that there's not crevices in there that can increase the risk of atherosclerosis. So what we've done is we've pegged the seesaw the other way. The standard American diet is high carbohydrate, low fat, right? In an attempt to reduce the likelihood that the plaque is actually going to get in there and stick. But what happens on the high fat diet is there's more fat in your bloodstream, but less of it sticks. That's the way I understand it. You want to?
Yeah, you look at nature. I always look and say, what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. You look at the cavemen. They would kill a deer or whatever they killed, and then they would go 4 or 5 days. They would eat the whole thing. They go 4 or 5 days without eating, they kill something else and eat it again. Who else does that? Lions. Lions are skinny. They run, they kill something, they eat the whole thing, they wait for 3 or 4 or 5 days. Our dogs don't eat 5 times a day. Does anyone feed their dog 5 times a day? Does anyone know? And the dogs who wear nice sweaters or something might every once in a while, but I think most of the time people feed their dog once in the morning, maybe once at night. I feed my dogs twice a day, right? And we feed them their natural, healthy kibble, like, because in the wild they always eat kibble, right? So we're saying, like, someone say, I give my dog chicken, they look at you like, oh my gosh, that's the worst thing you can do, right? A cat eating birds? That's crazy. They should eat kibble. No, they do eat birds. That's what they do. That's what their natural instinct is. So you look at that and you say, well, it doesn't make sense. What's interesting, and Jeff's going to talk more about the exercise, but lions don't jog around to kill something. They sprint, they try to kill it, they don't, they lay there. And then they wait for the next weak thing to come by and try to kill it again. They don't jog around for hours. And you don't see a fat lion unless you put it in the zoo. And you feed it. It doesn't have to do anything, you just feed it all the time. Now it gets fat. It doesn't do that in nature. You don't see fat lions running around, right? And generally you don't see fat animals running around. If you go to Mexico and you look at the cows, because they're all eating grass, they're all skinny. Like, these are pathetic looking cows. Because they're not getting, injected with a bunch of chemicals. I was in Cuba not too long ago and they were laughing. They said, you Americans are crazy. It takes this many days for the chicken to mature. You guys do it in like 1/3 of that time. Because you're shooting it with hormones and chemicals and all this stuff. And you eat their chicken, you say, well, I can see what you guys are talking about. You guys are going to love their about Guatemala, El Salvador, a lot of these places, they eat totally different. They eat real food.
So are we living according to our natural design? Right, obviously not. Right. So if you want to implement the ketogenic diet for the first time, then we're talking macronutrient ratios, and this might be a little too scientific, but the majority of your diet should be fat. And very little, very, very little of your diet should be carbohydrate. And you need some protein. So there's a minimal level of protein you need to sustain, keep your eyes bright, your teeth white, your skin tight. That's what protein does. So let's base your portions. Portions are still important, right? Let's talk about portions really quick. So if you're really insulin resistant, then calories aren't as important. Because no matter how much you starve yourself or how much you eat, you're still insulin resistant. There's still a hormonal issue preventing you from utilizing fat, preventing you from getting rid of that fatty liver. But once that is reduced, it doesn't matter how much you eat. And that's how sometimes people plateau. That's how you hear somebody who's eating bacon all day and they initially lost weight and then they plateau, right? So we do need to be conscious of the portions that we eat. And in a healthy individual, you have a healthy hunger and satiety response, right? Some people don't, though, right? So a meal has to be very little carb, and a thumb's worth of like starchy carb, a thumb's worth of blueberries, or a thumb's worth of strawberry is a good portion for carb. Fat should be the majority of the meal, and then you have to have a little bit of protein in there, and the palm's worth still works. And that's just a good general rule to get started. There's an argument over there, a discussion, we call it an argument, over whether you should be limiting your carbohydrate by grams according to total carbohydrate or net carbs. What do you think about that? What do you think?
I count total carbs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I think that there's a lot of misleading stuff out there where people are kind of trying to trick you a little bit.
Correct.
And the body's going to react differently. Doug, what's your opinion?
Total carbs, and this is why, because what's fiber is not necessarily 0 calorie value. It could have less calorie value, it could have no calorie value, and now they're introducing other things like allulose and different forms of fiber, and we really don't know the insulin response. They're just a new chemical to come out to try to fit that keto market. There you go. All right, so good things to eat. You don't have to be absolutely 0 carbs. Some people do for therapeutic carbohydrates. Some people have to do absolutely 0 carbohydrate. But for the sports nutrition, for the active athlete, there's benefit in vitamins and minerals still. There's 1 carb in a strawberry. There's 1 carb in 5 blueberries. And a little bit of lime a day will actually help. Right? Because we still need vitamins and minerals. The interesting thing that we're learning now is that your age, ethnicity, and gender aren't the only attributes to determine your micronutrient needs. So your vitamin C needs and your sodium needs and your potassium needs are not solely based on what your body type is or your attributes. It's based on what you're consuming. So on a high carbohydrate, low fat diet, you really have to watch sodium. On a high fat, low carbohydrate diet, your sodium intake can be much higher because your body utilizes it and loses it at a higher rate. Very interesting stuff.
And the reason that is because insulin. Once you drop insulin, insulin holds on to salt. So we've always said don't eat salt because it'll make your blood pressure go up. You look at the data, it's sugar that's the problem. High insulin levels. You lower that insulin level, people's blood pressure gets lower. So we say, well, lose 10 pounds, your blood pressure will get better. It's not because you lost 10 pounds, your blood pressure gets better. It's because you dropped your insulin to lose those 10 pounds. When you dropped your insulin level, guess what? Your blood pressure got better. So there's a lot of stuff like that where we kind of conflated these things and we make these observations while saying, well, what's the physiology behind that? You drop insulin down, everything gets better.
And there's ways to measure ketones in your body. And why is that significant? Because if you're not actually ingesting exogenous ketones, then your body is making indigenous ketones, and those ketones are a result of you primarily using fat for fuel. So there's a way to actually see if what you're doing is working, even if the scale's not moving. And there's urine strips, and then there's blood strips. This precision one is the one that we use in my office, and people can come in and just get their blood ketones measured. And then you have a new advice. You've been smoking something.
I can't play
some
with
kind
it
of
yet.
pipe or something.
It's called keto, and you can blow into this device. But I happen to have Android. They don't have the software yet for Android, so I can't play with it yet, but I want to. So let's talk about ketones for a minute, because everyone is so stuck on this ketone thing. Exogenous ketones, bump your ketone levels. That's it.
That's supplemental ketones.
So what you're doing, so put it this way. If I eat butter, 10,000 calories of butter today, guess what? My ketones are going to go crazy. Does that mean I'm losing weight? No, it doesn't. So people are chasing the ketones. I tell people, don't chase the ketones. If your ketone level is 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, you don't get an award if it's 2.5. Today, mine's 1.5. That's the highest it's been in a long time after a 2-day fast, right? If I was eating butter,
where's 1.5 on the scale? Oh, it's green.
I'm green.
You're doing good.
Yeah, today. So that's what we get into. People get because they get this idea that if you eat fat all day long, you're going to lose more weight. It's not true. That's not what anyone that understands a well-formulated ketogenic diet says. That's why having people like Jeff, having people who understand what the physiology is, you're going to do a lot better, because they're going to look and say, you're plateaued out. What do we do? Let's go up on calories, down on calories, right? Dan? Right? He's a perfect example. This guy, Mike, can you stand up for us too? Yes. How much did you used to weigh? Or how much have you lost, to put it that way?
90 pounds.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So he's a beast. I'm looking, I'm like, why are you talking about keto? Why you're a skinny guy talking about it? So he's lost 90, but he plateaued out for a long time. So he was at Jeff's place, and he was cutting his calories like crazy. Jeff did his metabolic rate and said, you're not eating enough. You got to eat more. He goes up on his caloric intake and loses weight, breaks his plateau. So it's the exact opposite of what we've been saying. So it's so individualized. The other point I want to make really quickly is, at Low Carb USA, there was a lady who stood up and she was talking about her body weight. And she lost a ton of weight, 30 pounds the first year, 8 pounds the next year, 4 pounds the next year, and nothing the next year. And she said, the reason I'm up here talking to you is I've done a DEXA scan. It's a scan where you get your body percentage fat and muscle. Every single 6 months, she's dropped fat and put on muscle mass. So people get frustrated. I'm not losing weight. Why are you putting on muscle mass? Look at, do you want to look like Ted Damon before or after, right? His weight didn't change. So that's it. People give up. My biggest advice is don't give up. Stay the course. Cut your carbs. You're going to do better. Ride it out.
And that natural continuum, if you do it right, as you increase fat and decrease carbohydrate, your meal frequency should go down. But what about the interim? What about how do we get you from where you are now with an unfavorable insulin response and a conditioned high carbohydrate diet, a condition to have carbohydrates? What do we do? So you can make decisions to move you in the right direction. And that's a combination of intermittent fasting. The natural approach is to lower your carbohydrate initially. Lower your carbohydrate. That should bring down your need to eat frequently. And then you can eventually start to try intermittent fasting. Right? But for some of my clients, they're so, especially my clients that have been on a sports nutrition program, they're so conditioned to eat more frequently They were afraid of fasting, so they never got to that point, and they still got good success eating, instead of 6 meals a day, maybe eating 3 or 4 meals a day, and then trying maybe 1 day of intermittent fasting, just trying it because it was an unfavorable day. And then there were others that were so used to eating fruits and vegetables with everything, cutting their fruits and vegetables, they felt like they were being unhealthy because we were cutting their portions down, even though it was a high fiber diet. But they felt better with intermittent fasting because their 30, 40 carbs that we would put on for the day could easily be split into 2 meals or 3 meals, and they still felt like they were eating healthy because they're eating more carbohydrates per meal, but still the same net carbohydrate that it would warrant for a low carbohydrate diet. So these are some of the strategies that we've used to help people transition. There we go. So these are the questions. And how many meals do you want to eat? Obviously, the bottom line is we've got to reduce processed food. We've got to get away from that tech-savvy food that's made in the lab, not grown in the earth or roaming the earth. And then we've got to get comfortable and not fat-phobic. We've got to get comfortable with fat in our plate, especially natural fat. If you're going to start intermittent fasting, eat 1 to 2 days a week. The intermittent fasting that I like the most is the 16-8. That means you don't eat anything of calorie value for 16 hours, because this thing called autophagy occurs around 12 hours. That means that the body starts to recognize that you're not eating, and it starts to get rid of older cells. It starts to use non-essential things that maybe could last a little longer, but are better just catabolized. So the 16-8 protocol works really well, and you can review this slide because you have a copy of it, or you have access to it. All right, what we want to do is put it all together, and the best is a combination of intermittent fasting and a very low or moderately low carbohydrate. And as Dr. Lynn said before, that's less than 50, in some cases less than 20 total carbs. All right, let's talk about exercise. That's the other half. That's what my family did. My whole family is here, and they exercise regularly. And let's talk about exercise faux pas really quick. Who's that guy? All right, we got Doug Reynolds in the midst of a repetition. He's got his rep face on. Can you see? Right? And he's being trained by Dr. Ben Bokikio, who does smart training. And Dr. Ben right there is, in that picture, is 70 years old, right? And he's got some guns on him. And he's atypical, pretty fit for a 70-year-old.
So the background on Dr. Ben, I'm at the Low Carb USA conference, sitting next to Doug, and Ben walks up to ask a question. He's wearing this kind of outfit. The rest of us are wearing like button-down shirts or whatever. So, Doug, who's this guy? Who does he think he is? He goes, oh, he's a real smart guy. He's really well trained in Duke University. All this, did a lot of research. And what's he famous for? He goes, oh, and he asked a really smart question. I said, well, what's he famous for? He has a book. What's his book called? 15 Minutes to Fitness. That's always a quack, right? There's no such thing as 15 minutes of fitness. It's crazy. You got to work out. You got to run. You got to do all this stuff. What's interesting about Dr. Ben is he has tons of data, and he shows a lot of health benefits. I think Jeff's going to talk about that, but this guy is pretty dang sharp, and I do his workout now, what Jeff's doing in his clinic. And so the funny part is I walk in to this, and I didn't know Doug was going to be there, and I look at that. I said, what are you doing here? He said, oh, Ben's talking. I want to come, because he was giving me a talk at Jeff's place. And so I looked and I said, didn't I see you 3 weeks ago? Were you like this? Because he was super muscular now. And he says, why? Because he was really thin, like a runner's body. He said, I've been working out with Ben 4 times. I said, come on. Are you taking steroids? Are you taking protein shakes? What do you do? He goes, no, my diet hasn't changed, right? So it's incredible, pretty amazing. And in the low carb community, I think this is the key that's been missing. Because we say, and it's true. When you look at historically, 90% is diet, maybe at most 10% exercise. Sorry, Jeff. But if you don't get your diet right, you can exercise all you want, you're not going to lose weight. If you don't get that carb and you don't get that insulin resistance better, exercise is going to help you with insulin resistance, but we don't have studies with low carb and doing this workout that he's doing. And I think this is going to change everything for all of us.
The cool thing about the studies with exercisers, though, is that they've maintained ketogenesis at a higher level of carbs because of their exercise regime, which is good. And that's something that Dr. Ben talks about in his book, and he is now a co-author with Doug and I of the new personal training course, and we're talking about using lifelong fitness as a tool to decrease insulin resistance, right? But another issue, we're going to talk about another doctor really quick. Look at this little X-ray. So if we're like that most days and most of the day, and then you come after work and are expected to exercise, how could I expect this guy on the left to do a proper squat? How could I expect him to do any kind of exercise? Right? His body is just ready to break. So he's to actually embark on exercise. The guy on the left is actually setting himself up for an injury. And in my experience, in the state of initiating people who are originally sedentary on a ketogenic diet, or trying to start a ketogenic diet, and they're trying to start exercise, that they are prone to an injury, right? And corrective exercise won't do it. They need acute physical therapy. So at the